My name is Yolanda Briggs. I'm 40 years old and I run a small breakfast diner in Elm Crossing, Wisconsin. Last month, my 16-year-old daughter spent 8 hours cooking a birthday dinner for 20 relatives for my mom's 70th. And at 4:15 in the afternoon, my mother sent one text that erased all of it. Change of plans. We're eating at a restaurant, adults only. I didn't argue with her. I didn't post a single word in the family chat. I made one quiet move instead. And by 8:40 the next morning, my mother was standing on my porch with a paper bag in her hand, ringing my doorbell like the house might not let her in. In 70 years, nobody had ever made her wait at a door. Here's what she didn't know about that night, and about the 24 years that led to it. Welcome back to Untold Secret Hub. This channel is where quiet women finally get loud. Stories about family, betrayal, and the exact moment enough becomes enough. Every story here is about someone who kept the peace until the peace stopped being worth keeping. If that sounds like your kind of story, drop a comment below, tell me where you're listening from, and subscribe. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Run a diner for 5 years and you learn the difference between a customer and a critic. Customers eat. Critics evaluate. Critics don't tip. I bought the Maple Street Diner in 2020 from the man I'd waitressed for since I was 18, and I have flipped eggs at 7:30 in the morning every day since, which means I know something about feeding people who don't say thank you. It's fine. The griddle doesn't need applause, and neither do I. But there's a difference between a stranger who forgets to say it and a family that's built an entire operating system out of not saying it. And I grew up inside that operating system. In my mother's world, every gathering had an org chart. There was a right table and a lesser table. There was a list of who hosted, who brought the good casserole, who was invited to the after party in the sunroom, and who found out about the sunroom from photos. My mother, Marguerite, ran all of it the way some women run garden clubs and some run governments, with a guest list. And me? For 24 years, I was the staff. I cooked the Easter ham. I hosted the showers. I did Thanksgiving the year her kitchen was being remodeled, and the year it wasn't, nobody ever asked me to. Asking would have meant noticing. My brother Curtis showed up with wine and got a toast. I showed up with 3 days of cooking and got asked where the serving spoons were. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because you need to understand the machine my daughter was born into. In my family, I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the black sheep either. I was the caterer, and the worst part is it took my own daughter's 16th year on this earth for me to see the apron I'd never taken off. Now let me tell you about Josie. My daughter is 16, a junior, and she is the kind of kid who shows love with her hands. She doesn't gush. She fixes your wobbly chair, charges your phone without being asked, and stands next to me on the diner's Saturday line like she was born holding tongues. She's worked weekends since she was 14. Paid on the books, because I don't run my family the way my mother runs hers. When Grandma Margaret's 70th came up on the calendar, Josie didn't buy a card. She planned a menu. She spent 2 weeks texting relatives, one by one, asking a single question. What's the one dish you remember from a family dinner that made you happy? She collected the answers like evidence. Aunt Roberta said chicken and dumplings. My cousin's kids voted mac and cheese, the baked kind with the crust. And for my mother, Josie didn't have to ask, because Marguerite has spent 30 years telling anyone who'd listen about her own grandmother's peach cobbler, the one nobody had ever gotten quite right since. Josie found a version of that recipe online, then adjusted it through 4 test batches until my kitchen smelled like a county fair. She budgeted the whole dinner out of her own savings. $310 of tip money and babysitting cash. And when I tried to slip her my card at the grocery store, she pushed it back and said, "It's my gift, Mom. Gifts count more when they cost you something." 16 years old, and she lettered a place card for every single guest, all 20. In the calligraphy she taught herself off a video. The one that said Grandma Marguerite was the largest, with a gold border she did twice to get straight. I watched her tape the menu to the fridge and I thought, this is the good part of us, distilled. I had no idea I was watching a test my mother was about to fail. I want to be clear about something, because I've replayed this part 100 times. I did not walk my daughter into an ambush blind. I know my mother. So 3 weeks out, I pinned it down in writing. I texted Marguerite, birthday dinner at our house. Saturday the 21st, 6 p.m. Josie's cooking the whole thing for you. Yes, and my mother texted back one word. Fine. Not lovely, not thank you, fine. I have hosted enough of her events to know that fine is a yellow light. So a week before, at Sunday lunch, I asked again, out loud, in front of witnesses. Mom, Saturday, our house, Josie's dinner. You're sure? She waved her hand like she was shooing the question off a tablecloth and said, yes, of course, your house. And then to Vivienne, her friend from the club who had stopped by to drop off bridge cards, she added the sentence I should have taken more seriously. Yolanda's place is cozy. Hummy, you know, simple. Vivienne smiled the way those women smile, with the bottom half of the face only. In my mother's dictionary, I knew cozy is not a compliment. Cozy is a floor she thinks she's above. I heard it. I logged it. And I did what I had always done with my mother's little knives. I translated it into something a daughter could live with. She's just old-fashioned. She'll melt when she tastes the cobbler. I had spent 24 years being fluent in her, and fluency, it turns out, is its own kind of blindness. Because what I heard as a snobby aside was actually a door quietly opening. And through it, 3 weeks later, at 40:15 on a Saturday afternoon, walked Vivienne's little gift. The day of the party, Josie was up before I was, and I get up at 40:30 for a living. By 7, she had the kitchen organized like a line cook, stations labeled in painter's tape, borrowed sheet pans from the diner stacked by size, a handwritten timeline taped to the cabinet with every dish scheduled backward from 6000. Chicken and dumplings for Aunt Roberta. The baked mac and cheese with the crust, doubled because the little cousins were coming. Green beans the way my late father liked them, because Josie wanted him at the table somehow. A roast, rolls from scratch, which I told her was madness and which she did anyway. And the cobbler, the famous cobbler, time to come out warm at 6:15 so the whole house would smell like Margaret's childhood when the candles went in. My husband Dwight ran errands like a man possessed. Ice, folding chairs, more butter, different butter. I mostly stayed out of the way, which for a diner cook watching someone else run her kitchen is a form of love I hope my daughter someday understands. Around 3, Josie washed her hands, untied her apron, and sat at the dining table to finish the place cards. 20 of them fanned out in rows, her calligraphy getting more confident with each one. She said, Grandma Marguerite at the head of the table, gold border, straightened it twice. At 400, she stood in the doorway surveying 8 hours of work, 6 dishes, a set table, a house that smelled like 3 generations, and she allowed herself one small smile. At 14:15, my phone lit up on the counter. I remember the exact time because the oven timer read 1:45 on the cobbler, and I remember thinking before I even picked it up, it's her birthday, surely not even my mother. The text was to the whole family group chat, all 20 guests, sent 45 seconds before the one she sent to me privately. I checked the timestamps later, and that detail still tells me everything about the order of operations in my mother's heart. The group message read, change of plans, everyone. Vivienne has booked the private room at Del Vecchio's as my birthday gift. We're eating at a restaurant tonight, 7:00 p.m., adults only please. It's a lovely room. See you there. And then to me separately. You can bring the cobbler if you want. Adults only. I stood in my kitchen and read it 3 times. The way you reread a lab result that can't be right. Del Vecchio's 700, adults only, with an exclamation point of lipstick on it. It's a lovely room. My daughter was upstairs changing into the dress she'd bought for tonight. On my stove sat 6 finished dishes for 20 people. And in my dining room sat 20 hand-lettered place cards, and the one at the head of the table had a gold border done twice. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She was at the salon. I knew because she'd posted a photo from the chair. Fresh silver curls captioned 70 and fabulous. I called again. Nothing. I texted Mom, Josie cooked all day. Everything is ready. Please call me. The reply came 9 minutes later, and it was not a call. Don't make this difficult, Yolanda. Vivienne went to a great deal of trouble. A restaurant is simply more appropriate for the occasion. Adults only. There it was, twice in one afternoon. The phrase that would follow me around for the rest of this story. Not an accident, not a slip, a policy. I turned my phone face down and walked into the kitchen doorway to figure out what I was going to say. And I didn't have to say anything, because Josie was already standing at the counter in her new dress with her own phone in her hand. She was in the family chat. Of course she was. She was one of the 20. She had watched the plan for her dinner get cancelled in real time, in front of everyone, by the woman it was for. I watched my daughter read it again. Then she set the phone down, picked up the sugar shaker, and went back to finishing the top of the cobbler, and without looking up, she said, in a voice so level it broke my heart cleaner than any sobbing could have, "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it. I'm used to it." 16 years old, 8 hours into a gift. And her first reflex was to comfort me, and to file the whole thing under normal. I stood in that doorway doing math I'd never let myself do. The dance recital when she was 8 that Grandma missed for bridge night. The 10th birthday party moved to a Sunday, because Marguerite had brunch. The swim meet no one came to. Every single time I had knelt down to my daughter's eye level and translated. "Grandma loves you in her own way. She's from a different generation. Be patient with her." I thought I'd been building a bridge between them. Standing in that doorway, smelling 8 hours of her patience coming out of my oven, I finally saw what I'd actually been building. My daughter had learned the family rulebook by heart, and I was the one who'd been teaching it to her, one gentle translation at a time. Let me show you the world I grew up inside. In my mother's house there were 2 tables at every holiday. The dining room table, mahogany, candles, cloth napkins, and the card table in the den, vinyl top, folding legs, one short. I ate at the card table until I was 22 years old. 22. I was promoted, her word, promoted, the year I got engaged to Dwight, because a fiancé made me, and I quote, a full household. My cousin Renee never got promoted at all. She stopped coming instead. Invitations in my mother's world were report cards. Who hosted Easter was a standings table. When my father was alive, he'd wink at me across the 2 tables and sneak me the good rolls. And after he died 5 years ago, the winking stopped and the org chart tightened, because grief for my mother is best managed through seating. Here's the thing I want to be fair about. She is not a cartoon. She remembers every grandchild's shoe size. She shows up to hospitals. When my diner flooded in 2022, she was there at 6 the next morning with rubber boots and a wet vac, and she worked the shop line beside me for 2 days and never once mentioned it afterward. My mother knows how to love with her hands. She just cannot let love outrank protocol. I'd spent my whole life translating her, softening her rules into quirks, her cruelty into generation. But standing in my kitchen that afternoon, with her policy glowing on my phone, a new question walked in and sat down. One I had never once thought to ask in 40 years. I knew every rule in my mother's dictionary, but who wrote it? Meanwhile, the family chat did what my family always does when Marguerite issues a decree. It went diplomatically, cowardly, quiet. 2 thumbs up emojis. One sounds fancy from a cousin's husband who has never once had an opinion. And then in the private channels, the real conversation started, because adults only had math in it. My cousin Danis has 3 kids under 10. My cousin Marcus has a 6-year-old plus a baby. Between the 2 of them, adults only had just uninvited 8 people from a 20-person party on 4 hours' notice, on a Saturday. In a town where you cannot conjure a sitter by 60 any more than you can conjure snow in July. Denise texted me directly. "So what are we supposed to do? Leave them in the car?" Marcus's wife sent me a voice memo that started calm and ended with a phrase I won't repeat the middle of. And I realized, reading those messages at my kitchen counter, that my mother's new plan hadn't just erased Josie's dinner. It had quietly sorted the entire family into who mattered tonight and who didn't. The club worthy and the car seat crowd, the way she had been sorting us my whole life, at every mahogany table with a card table annex in the den. The only difference was that this time she'd done it in writing, with a timestamp, to all 20 of us at once. My phone sat on the counter filling up with other people's hurt. 6 dishes steamed gently on my stove, and upstairs I could hear my daughter taking off the dress she'd bought for a party that no longer wanted her. Something in me, something that had been on its knees being reasonable for 24 years, very quietly stood up. Before I tell you about the phone call with my brother, let me stop for 1 second. If you've ever watched your child's effort get erased by one sentence from an adult who should have known better. A cancelled visit. A forgotten recital. A "we'll see" that meant no. Tell me in the comments what that sentence was. I read every single one, and I promise you it matters more than the people who said it ever knew. Okay, my brother Curtis. I called him because some ancient reflex in me still believed that if the two of us ever pushed on the same wall at the same time, it might move. Curtis is 44, sells commercial insurance, and has survived our mother the way smart men survive weather, by carrying an umbrella and never, ever commenting on the storm. He picked up on the second ring, and before I could finish laying it out, he sighed. The family sigh. Yolanda, it's her birthday, her 70th. Whatever this is about the venue, don't make it a thing. I told him it was already a thing. His niece had made 20 place cards for a thing. Kids don't care about that stuff as much as you think, he said, and I heard faintly a golf broadcast in the background. Look, it's adults only, it's one dinner. Josie's a big girl, come, don't come, but if this blows up, it's not going to be Mom who blew it up. You know how this works. I did know how it works. That was the whole problem. I was a certified expert in how it works. I thanked my brother, wished him a good back nine, and hung up, and I crossed the second to last name off the list of people I'd been hoping might stand next to me. The last name on that list was my husband. Dwight is a good man, and good men in families like mine come installed with the peacekeeping software. He came home from the ice run to a war zone that smelled like cobbler, listened to the whole thing with his jaw working, and then said the reasonable words I knew he'd say, because I'd said them myself for 24 years. One dinner, Yolanda. We grit our teeth, we go, we come home. It's her 70th. You want to be the story at her 70th. He wasn't wrong by the old rules. He was quoting them accurately. I didn't argue, because there was nothing to argue. The old rules are internally consistent. That's what makes them a prison. And then my husband walked through the kitchen to get a glass of water, and he stopped. Josie was at the counter in her sweatpants, dress upstairs on the bed, and she wasn't crying, which would have been easier. She was wrapping, methodically, neatly, with the diner's technique I'd taught her. 6 dishes, one by one, into containers labeled with painter's tape and a Sharpie in her careful hand. Chicken and dumplings, Aunt Roberta. Mac and cheese, freeze half. 8 hours of a gift being folded up and put away like out of season clothes. Dwight stood there with his water and watched his daughter quietly file her own party into the refrigerator, and I watched 15 years of keep the peace drain out of my husband through the floor. He set the glass down. He looked at me, not at his phone, not at the door, at me, and he asked, very quietly, the only question left in the house. What are you going to do? And the honest answer at 4:30 that afternoon was that I didn't fully know yet. What I knew was that my mother had one phone call coming. One last exit offered in good faith. She was about to spend it. She answered on the first ring this time. Hair done. Timeline clear, victory in hand. Yolanda, please tell me you're not calling to be dramatic. I was, for the record, standing very still in my pantry with the door closed, which is the least dramatic room in America. I made her an offer with no teeth in it at all. The kind you make when you're still hoping the person you love is in there somewhere. Mom, Josie cooked your favorites, 6 dishes from scratch with her own money. Here's what I'm asking. We bring the food to Del Vecchio's and make it part of the night. Call it family style. The room's already private. Or we move the restaurant to Sunday lunch and do tonight at our house as planned. Either way, Vivienne's gift still counts. And either way, your granddaughter gets to give you hers. Pick one and I'll make it happen. Silence. The expensive kind. And then my mother's voice, cool as the good china. Del Vecchio's is not a potluck, Yolanda. I am not turning a private room into a church basement, and I'm certainly not rearranging my birthday around a teenager's project, a project. 8 hours, $310, 4 test batches of her own grandmother's cobbler. A project. She can cook for the family some other time. My mother went on, gathering warmth the way frost does. Honestly, this is what I mean about you. Everything becomes a negotiation. Vivienne went to enormous trouble. The room seats 12. It's elegant. It's adults only and it starts at 7. Wear the navy dress. It's slimming. And she hung up. I stood in my pantry among the canned tomatoes and the backup napkins, phone warm against my ear, and I noted, with a strange professional calm, the exact shape of the door that had just closed. The room seats 12. 20 people were invited. She had already decided which 9 of us were furniture. I came out of the pantry and stood at my dining room table. And that's where this story turns. So let me put you exactly where I was standing. The table was already set. We'd done it at noon, Josie and I, leaves added, cloths pressed, borrowed chairs squared up like a wedding, and marching down the middle of it in 2 neat rows, sat 20 hand-lettered place cards. Aunt Roberta, Uncle Gene, Denise, Marcus, each of the kids. The little ones' cards had doodles on them. A soccer ball for Denise's oldest, a dinosaur for the baby, because Josie said babies deserve dinosaurs. Place cards for a family, not a court. No head-top calligraphy for the important people, and ballpoint for the rest. All the same ink, all the same care, every seat worth the same trouble, except one card was bigger, and it sat at the head of the table. Grandma Marguerite, gold border, hand-ruled, done twice. I'd watched her measure it against a credit card to get the line straight. I picked it up. I don't know what I was looking for. Wait, maybe. And when I turned it over, there was pencil on the back, faint, in my daughter's real handwriting, the fast one, not the calligraphy. Happy 70th from your sus chef. Her sus chef. That's what Josie called herself the summer she was 11, elbow, deep in diner prep. When she announced that one day she'd cook a whole dinner for the family and Grandma would sit right there. 5 years she'd been carrying that little plan. I stood at my perfectly set table, holding a gold, bordered card addressed to a woman who had just called it a project. And I stopped being a translator. I put the card back in its place at the head of the table, and I left the whole table exactly as it was. 20 cards, 20 chairs, because some part of me had already decided something the rest of me was still catching up to. At 40:40, my phone buzzed again. My mother, having sensed, the way she always senses, that her middle child had not yet fallen in line, had escalated from policy to terms. Since you haven't confirmed, I expect you and Dwight at Del Vecchio's at 7 alone. This is not a debate. If you choose to soak at home instead, don't bother with Thanksgiving, and don't expect me to explain to the family why my own daughter boycotted my 70th. They'll draw their own conclusions. I read it twice. There is a special genre of message that only controlling people can write. The kind where every sentence is a hostage. Come alone. Your daughter is the ransom. Don't bother with Thanksgiving. The holidays are the ransom. They'll draw their own conclusions. Your reputation is the ransom. For 24 years I had paid every single one of these promptly, in full, and called it being the bigger person. I want to be honest with you about what I felt standing there, because it wasn't rage, not yet. It was inventory. I looked at the stove, 6 dishes. I looked at the table, 20 cards. I looked at the clock, 4:43. And I looked last at the ceiling, toward my daughter's room, where a girl who had said I'm used to it was probably lying on her bed, teaching herself to mean it. Here is what the inventory came to. If I drove to that restaurant tonight, even silently, even just to keep the peace, the lesson would be carved into Josie permanently, deeper than any calligraphy. Effort is a project. Love is a seating chart. And Mom will always, always translate. There was no middle seat left at this table. My mother had removed it herself at 4:40 in writing. All that remained was to choose which woman I was going to be at 60. I went and sat on the edge of my bed for 10 minutes alone and did the thing I'd been avoiding for 24 years. I audited myself, not my mother, me. The recital when Josie was 8, missed for bridge night. I'm the one who knelt down and said Grandma loves you in her own way. The 10th birthday moved to a Sunday for Margaret's brunch schedule. I'm the one who called it flexible. The swim meet nobody came to, where she got second place and scanned the bleachers twice. I'm the one who texted photos to the family with 3 exclamation points, so nobody would have to feel bad about not being in them. Every one of those translations had felt like protection at the time. Sitting on my bed with the clock running, I finally heard them the way Josie must have filed them. A fluent adult explaining patiently, over and over, why her hurt shouldn't be believed. My mother built the ranking system fine, but I was the one who taught my daughter to accept her rank politely. Every translation was a small tuition payment to a school. I should have pulled us both out of years ago. That's the sentence that finally stood me up off that bed. Because here's what I suddenly understood, with the kind of clarity that feels less like a light bulb and more like a fever breaking. I could not get Josie a better seat at my mother's table. Nobody could. That table was built plank by plank, specifically so that someone would always be below the salt. It needed a card table in the den the way an engine needs exhaust. The only move that had ever existed, the one hiding in plain sight behind 24 years of my diplomacy, wasn't to argue for a chair, it was to set a different table entirely. I walked downstairs. I picked up my phone. And first, before anything else, I went to find my daughter. Josie was on her bed, still in sweatpants, watching a cooking video with the sound off, which is what she does instead of crying. I sat down next to her and I didn't soften anything, because I was done softening things. Here's what I'm thinking, I said. I open our doors tonight, 600, exactly as planned. I invite the whole family, everyone, kids first. Grandma will take it as war. Some people will go to the restaurant anyway. It might be 4 of us eating 6 dishes, and Monday the phone calls will be ugly. If we do this, you're not a kid whose party got rescued. You're the chef. It's your food on the line. So it's your call too. She was quiet for a moment, and I watched her weigh it. Really weigh it, the costs, the aunts, the empty chairs, because my daughter is not naive. She is 16 and fluent in this family. Then she paused her silent video and she looked at me, and for the first time since Forsign 15, the flatness was gone from her face. Something underneath it had woken back up. If it's 4 people, she said, I'm still plating it in courses. Then a beat later, quieter. You'd really do that to Grandma. And I said the truest sentence I'd said all day. Not to Grandma, baby. For you, there's a difference, and tonight seems like a good night to finally learn it. She nodded once. Chef to chef, we had a service to run. I sat at the kitchen counter and wrote the message to the family chat, and I want to show you the 3 drafts I deleted. Because they matter. Draft 1 was a prosecution, a list, dates included, of every event my mother had rescheduled, every kid she'd exiled to the den, 24 years of receipts ending with tonight. Accurate. Satisfying. Deleted because it was a trial, and trials are just seating charts with verdicts. Draft 2 was sarcastic, since the private room only seats 12. Deleted, because sarcasm is my mother's native tongue and I was done being fluent in her. Draft 3 was an essay, paragraphs, apologies in advance, context, softening. The translator's version. Me kneeling one last time between my family and the truth, explaining everybody to everybody. I read it twice and deleted it slowest of all, because that draft was the woman I'd been for 24 years, and she died hard. Here's what I finally understood, cursor blinking in the empty box. Anything I wrote in her language, blame, status, spin, kept me at her table, just seated angrier. The only message that actually left the table was the one with no argument in it at all. An invitation doesn't argue. An invitation just opens a door and stands there, warm, with the porch light on. So I wrote something short and warm. I attached 2 photographs. And before I could reread it into oblivion, I did one last thing first, because my mother, whatever else she is my mother, and she deserved to hear the door open before the rest of the family did. At 500 exactly, I texted my mother privately one last time. Mom, I love you and happy birthday. I'm not coming to the restaurant without Josie. I won't leave her home like a coat. Dinner is still at our house at 6. Everything she cooked for you is on the table, and the seat at the head has your name on it in gold. It will be there at 6, and it will still be yours if you walk in at 8. I hope you come. Either way, I'm done choosing between my mother and my daughter. I choose the table where both of you fit. I read it once and sent it before the translator in me could soften I'm done into I'd rather not. Then I watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. Longer this time. My mother composing, editing, recalibrating. A woman who has never once in her life sent a first draft. Then the dots vanished, and in their place, silently, a single word surfaced under my message and just sat there. Scene. 5 3 p.m. Read and dismiss the way you dismiss a waiter. And I'd be lying if I told you it didn't hurt. That little gray word. After 40 years, hurt still finds the gap in the armor. But it also did me one final favor. It burned the last bridge I might have been tempted to stand on, wringing my hands. She had seen the open door. She was choosing the room that seats 12.
Okay, Mom.
Dulai noted, in writing, with a timestamp. Now it was the family's turn. At 5:07 I sent it to the family chat, all 20 of us, right under my mother's restaurant announcement, like a small stone set gently on a big desk. 2 photographs. The dining table fully set, 20 place cards catching the evening light. And a close-up of one dish, the cobbler, golden and imperfect and obviously homemade. And a short caption, no explanation, no accusation, nothing for anyone to argue with. Dinner is still at 6 at our house, exactly as planned. Everything on the table was cooked for Grandma by Josie, from all your favorite recipes. Everyone is welcome at my table, kids especially. I put the phone face down on the counter, and I'll tell you the same thing I told Dwight when he raised his eyebrows at me. I wasn't recruiting. I refused to count who was coming. Refused to check the chat. Refused to turn my daughter's dinner into a poll. The message wasn't a move against the restaurant. The restaurant could have its evening. It was just a fact, stated once. This door is open, this food exists. This child cooked it. Everyone fits. What people did with that fact would tell me, at long last, who my family actually was underneath 4 years of seating charts. And I genuinely did not know the answer. Dwight flipped his phone over too in solidarity, and the two of us stood in our kitchen like people waiting out a coin toss. At 5:58 the doorbell rang. It was Denise. Denise, her husband, and all 3 kids, the youngest already reaching for me from her hip. And behind them on the walk, like a second wave, Marcus's crew. His 6-year-old running ahead, his wife carrying the baby carrier like a lantern. We were always coming here, Denise said, handing me a bag of dinner rolls nobody needed. The other invitation didn't include my children, so as far as I'm concerned, it didn't include me. Aunt Roberta arrived at 6 sharp with her coat already off, somehow, a woman perpetually ready to do dishes. Then Mrs. Okonkwo from my dad's side with a bottle of sparkling cider for the chef. 14 people, counting us. I did not count the 8 who weren't there. I'll be honest, I noticed. The gold-bordered card at the head of the table sat in front of an empty chair all night, and I never once moved it. But 14 people filled my house to the walls anyway, because children count double when a house is being measured for warmth. And my daughter. My daughter tied her apron back on, stood at the pass between my kitchen and my dining room, and ran her first service. Courses announced. Chicken and dumplings set down in front of Aunt Roberta, who looked at it, and had to fan her own face with her hand. The mac and cheese with the crust, mobbed by cousins. My father's green beans, and Roberta quietly saying, "Oh Harold." Nobody at that table was furniture. I'll tell you about the other party the way I learned it secondhand. From Roberta, who heard it from her friend Marcia, who was at Del Vecchio's that night for an anniversary, and had a clear view of the private room. Because in a town like ours, there is always a Marcia. 8 people in a room set for 12. My mother at the head in her Salon curls, Vivian to her right, presiding over her gift. Curtis and his wife, 3 club couples worth of my mother's social circle, minus a husband with a cold. And that was the party. 8 adults, no one under 50, in a lovely room with a long wine list and, per Marcia, the acoustic quality of a bank. The food was reportedly excellent. The toasts were reportedly brief. My mother reportedly checked her phone twice during the entree, which for a woman with her posture regarding phones at tables, is practically a flare fired over the bow. And at 80:53 I know because I was there for this part, the family chat silent since my 5:07 message quietly came back to life. Denise posted a photo of the cobbler, half demolished, then one of the kids' table, the real kids' table, the joyful kind, juice boxes raised mid-toast. Then Roberta the place cards, no captions, no commentary. Not one word aimed at anyone. Just a door standing open in photographs, where 20 people could see it. The chat's reply from the restaurant contingent was silence of a very different texture than before. The last guests left at 10:00. Josie fell asleep upright on the couch at 10:40, apron still half-tied, and Dwight carried her up the stairs the way he used to when she was 7, her feet hanging comically far past his elbow now. And I stood alone in my kitchen washing the last sheet pan. And that's when it finally hit me. Not triumph, nothing so shiny. What hit me elbow deep in dishwater at 11 at night was her voice at 14:15, "It's okay Mom, I'm used to it." I cried then, quietly, into the steam. For a girl who had taught herself to expect the card table. And for the 24 years of me who had handed her the flashcards. Because I want to be honest with you about what this night actually cost, underneath the cobbler and the juice box toasts. My mother had not called. Not during dinner. Not after the photos. Somewhere across town she was taking off her earrings in a quiet house, turning 70, furious at me, and some 7-year-old part of me still wanted to drive over and fix it, translate it, cater it back together. That part of me doesn't die in one night. I don't think it dies at all. But standing at that sink, I finally knew the difference between fear and grief. I could survive my mother's anger. What I could not survive was my daughter at 40, saying I'm used to it to a child of her own. Aunt Roberta had stayed to help dry, because Roberta always stays. And while I was still at the sink, she picked up a towel, and, without preamble, gave me the missing chapter of my own mother. You know, she wasn't born like this, Roberta said. 1980, Margaret was 24, first Thanksgiving as a Briggs bride. Her mother-in-law sat her in the kitchen. Not near the kitchen, honey, in it. Told her the dining table was for family, and she wasn't family yet. She was married to family. Your mother ate her Thanksgiving standing up at the counter, alone. Listening to them laugh through the wall, and it wasn't one holiday either. She ate in that kitchen every holiday until Curtis was born. She used to say Curtis earned her a seat, a baby earning his mother a chair. Roberta folded the towel into a neat, furious square. The Briggses ranked her. So the day she got a table of her own, she started ranking. Your mother didn't invent that rulebook, Yolanda. She inherited it. Doesn't excuse it. But that's where the ink came from. I stood with my hands in the cooling water and let that land. My mother, 24, eating alone at a counter, learning the exact lesson she'd spent 50 years administering. It explained everything. It changed nothing. Or, as I finally said to Roberta, drying my hands, understanding the ink doesn't unwrite the sentence. It just tells me how far back the sentence goes. Before the doorbell rings, and it's going to ring, at AC40 on a Sunday morning. And you already know who's standing on the other side of that door. I want to ask you something honestly. If it were your mother on that porch, after the night I just described, would you open the door? And if you would, on whose terms, yours or hers? Be honest with me in the comments. I wasn't sure of my own answer until my hand was on the knob. Sunday morning, 8:40. Dwight had taken Josie to the diner to return the sheet pans. I was alone with my coffee and the wreckage of a good party when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I saw the shape I'd know anywhere. The posture first, because my mother's spine arrives everywhere 10 seconds before she does. But something about the outline was wrong, and it took me a moment to name it. Stillness. My mother does not stand at doors. My mother sweeps through them mid-sentence, because every door in this family had always been functionally hers. This shape just stood there, rang once, waited. In her hand, a brown paper bag held with both hands the way you hold something in a waiting room. I set my coffee down and did not hurry. Not out of cruelty. I want to be precise about this. Because the difference matters. I wasn't making her wait to punish her. I was making myself slow down. Because the woman who usually answered that door in this family was the translator, the fixer, the caterer, sprinting to smooth the moment before it could mean anything. That woman had had a long night and a longer 24 years, and I'd given her the morning off. The kettle had just boiled. I poured it over the leaves, set 2 cups on the tray out of 40 years of habit, and looked at the second cup for a moment. Then I left it on the tray anyway, and I went and opened the door. My mother came in the way a diplomat enters a country that has just voted wrong. Chin level, eyes doing inventory. She clocked the dining room immediately, table still extended, cloth still on, and down the center, because I hadn't had the heart to clear them. 20 place cards. Her card, the gold-bordered one, still at the head, in front of the chair nobody had sat in. I watched her see it. Something crossed her face and was gone, like a fish under ice. She sat at my kitchen table, accepted the tea, arranged the paper bag by her feet, and opened with the sentence she had clearly drafted in the car. The family is saying you split the family, Yolanda. Roberta's photos made everything worse. Vivienne's friends saw them. Everyone's talking. So here's what we'll do. You'll post something in the chat today. Light, gracious, you're good at that. Saying it was all a mix-up, 2 celebrations, 1 big happy weekend. And then we will simply never speak of this again. I stirred my tea and let the sentence finish landing, and I marveled at it. Truly, the way you'd marvel at a cathedral. My mother had lost the actual night, the food, the family, the photographs, and had arrived at my door before 9 the next morning to negotiate for the only territory she'd ever really governed, which was the story. Not sorry, not what I missed, spin, Mom, I said, and I kept my voice in the register I use for burnt orders at the diner, calm and unbudging. I'm not posting anything. I didn't split the family. I set a table. Everyone was invited to it, you most of all. Your name's still on it in gold. You can go look. People sat where they wanted to sit. That's not a mix-up. That's just what happened. And everyone who was in that chat watched it happen. My mother set down her cup with the tiny click that has ended arguments in our family for 50 years. The click, for the first time in my life, didn't work. What followed was my mother running through her entire arsenal in order, and me discovering, cup by cup of cooling tea, that none of it worked on a woman who no longer needed a seat. First came the birthday. It was my 70th, Yolanda. You had one job, to be there. I agreed the number was important, and observed that Josie had thought so too. 8 hours worth. Then came the bargain, offered like a kindness. Fine. At Christmas, Josie can sit at the main table. There. Is that what this was about? Are we finished? And I want you to notice what that offer actually was. My mother, even now, could only imagine the problem as a seating error, solvable by promotion. One chair granted from the throne for services rendered. 10 years ago I would have taken that deal and called it a breakthrough. I would have driven home glowing, another successful translation. I said no. Not angrily. I just declined it. The way you decline a coupon for a store you've stopped shopping at. And my mother stared at me across her tea like a chess player watching her opponent stand up mid-game and walk cheerfully out of the tournament. And that's when it finally cracked. Not the temper, the posture. Her shoulders came down half an inch. Her voice lost the salon finish. And my mother, 70 years and 1 day old, asked me the first genuine question she had asked me in 24 years. Then what do you want from me, Yolanda? What am I supposed to do? The kitchen went very quiet. I set down my cup and I gave her the whole price, the entire toll, the one condition on which the rest of her years with this branch of her family now stood. Nothing with me, Mom. We're square. I got everything I needed at 6000 last night. It's Josie you owe. She's in the backyard right now reading on the steps. So you're going to walk out there and you're going to tell your granddaughter, not me, her, what her cooking meant. You'll know it went well if she shows you the menu she made you. That's it. That's the whole price of this table. My mother looked at the back door the way soldiers look at open ground. Then she picked up her paper bag and stood. I stayed at the kitchen window. Because some conversations you're not supposed to hear, only guard. My mother crossed my back porch like it was a stage with no marks on it, a woman who has commanded every room of her life, visibly lost in a backyard. Josie looked up from her book, didn't stand, didn't rescue her either. My daughter is done rescuing adults, and I have never been prouder of a lesson I never meant to teach. And then my mother, in her pressed slacks and her day-old salon curls, lowered herself down onto the concrete step beside my daughter. Not the chair 2 feet away. The step, and opened the paper bag, and out of it came a container I recognized, because it had left my house the night before in Aunt Roberta's tote. A single serving of peach cobbler, the lid fogged from the fridge. Roberta, it turned out, had dropped it on Margaret's porch on her way home that night, with a note that said, "Only you should at least taste it." The fork my mother pulled from that bag was from her own good silver. She had come armed for a ceremony. I watched through the glass as she said something, watched Josie answer one syllable, watched my mother eat cold. On a step, the dessert her granddaughter had rebuilt from 4 test batches of a dead woman's memory. She ate the whole thing slowly, and whatever she said when she finished, I never asked, and Josie has never fully told me. That conversation belongs to the two of them. I watched my daughter's shoulders come down from around her ears for the first time in 2 days. I watched her go inside and come back out with a piece of cardstock. I knew. The menu hand-lettered, Margaret's 70th birthday dinner across the top. I watched my mother read every line of it with her finger, the way she reads hymnals. They sat on that step for 10 more minutes, an empress and a line cook, and nothing dramatic happened at all. No tears you could see from a window, no hug for the highlight reel. Just 2 people at the same level, eating from the same pan of history. One of them saying thank you approximately 50 years late, and the other one 16 and merciful, letting it count. Here's what that morning bought, and what it didn't, because I promised you honest and I'm keeping the receipt. On her way out, My mother paused next to me at the front door, straightened a picture frame that was already straight, and said, not quite looking at me, "The seasoning in the chicken and dumplings." A pause, geological. She gets that from my grandmother. Nobody else ever got it right. And then she left, spine first, into the Sunday morning. That was it. That was the entire concession speech. 1 inch of ground delivered sideways about seasoning. But I've been fluent in my mother for 40 years, and I can tell you the translation. That inch was the whole war. The rest of the fallout came in over the following week in the usual family frequencies. Curtis texted me privately. "You actually did it." A text managing to be 50% accusation and 50% awe, which for Curtis is a standing ovation. 2 of the club, circuit relatives went cool at me for a season, and I let them. Frost thaws or it doesn't, and my house was warm either way. Vivienne sent my mother a fruit basket, and I'm told referred to the whole affair at Bridge as that unfortunate scheduling matter, which in country club is how empires file their defeats. And the family chat, the same chat where a 16-year-old had watched her gift get cancelled with an exclamation point, quietly became the place where Denise asked the following Thursday, completely deadpan, "So when's the next dinner at Yolanda's?" Asking for 11 people. I didn't gloat in the chat or anywhere else. I'm telling this story a month later, and I still haven't posted a word about any of it. Because the win was never the story. My mother taught me everything I know about narrating a family. And the whole point of that Saturday was to stop. The empire didn't fall. Empires rarely do. But that morning, it knocked and waited and said thank you to a 16-year-old on a concrete step. I'll take that over a crown any day of the week. It's been 6 weeks, and I want to tell you what's become normal, because normal is where revolutions either take root or die. On the first Sunday of this month, my dining table was extended again, cloths on, and down the middle stood a new set of hand-lettered place cards. Because Josie's table is a thing now. First Sunday every month our house. Josie plans the menu. The cousins' kids get cards with doodles. Aunt Roberta arrives with her coat somehow already off. And there is no head of the table, because Josie seats people wherever the conversation needs them, which is a philosophy of hospitality she invented herself, and which I intend to steal for the diner. Denise's crew has not missed one. Marcus's baby has eaten strained peaches off the good spoons. And my mother came to the first one. She sat in the middle of the table, at a place card that said, in gold-bordered calligraphy, simply Grandma. Not Marguerite Briggs, not the head seat, just Grandma. Same ink as everybody. And I watched her read that card and pocket it. Actually pocket it, when she thought no one was looking. She missed the second Sunday for a club thing. And here's the miracle nobody warned me about. It was fine, the door stayed open, nobody grieved. The dumplings got eaten. She is who she is. The difference is that her rank doesn't set the weather in my house anymore. She can come sit in the warmth as an equal, or she can miss it. And either way, the cobbler comes out at 60-15. As for Josie, she's applying to culinary school for fall. Her application essay opens with a birthday dinner for 14. She let me read it once at the kitchen counter, and I had to hold the pages away from my face, like a woman checking her mascara at a funeral. Midway through that first Josie's table, while the cousins were fighting over crust corners, my daughter leaned into my shoulder at the pass and said quietly, "I'm not used to this yet." I looked out at the loud, unranked, gravy-stained table she built, and I gave her the only inheritance I have left that's worth anything. "Good," I said. "Don't ever be." I spent 24 years asking for a better seat at my mother's table, and it turns out the only thing I ever had to do was set my own, because the people who love you don't need a ranking to find their chairs. That's my story. 8 hours of cooking, 1 text at 40-15, 20 place cards, and 14 chairs that filled themselves. If someone in your family hands out seats like prizes, maybe this is your sign to set your own table and see who shows up hungry. Tell me in the comments who you'd save a chair for. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if this story fed something in you.